Hi, everyone. This is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. I am now going live, and we have Captain J is the moniker he wishes to use here with us today. And this is a very impromptu setup. We are going to put this onto YouTube after the fact. So Captain J, there's no actually, let me move this out of the way. Okay, there's no clear-cut way to ascertain whether or not you have actually been to Mars and part of the Mars program. So I want people to understand that from the beginning here. However, you have come forward and you have a testimony, and I'm going to give you some time here to talk about your experiences, and we're going to sort of, this may be one of a series of interviews. If there's too much to cover, we will sort of reconvene at another time and follow it up. So here you go. So welcome, and please introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm using the name Captain J because it is my first initial, and also it's the letter before K in the alphabet. And when I saw Captain K come online, that's Randy Kramer, he called himself Captain K, I thought, well, there it is. You know, here's my opportunity. I've been waiting 20 years. I've been trying to put stuff up online. It's, 7, 8 years ago, and just, unable to get far. But once Randy appeared, I realized that this is what we've been waiting for, So, letter J before K in the alphabet, I was up there, 20, 30 years before him, but it links directly. It's the same people in the same organizations. So right off the bat, starting in the 1950s, as a child, I was put into the program, various programs, and we were Navy at that time, where we did a lot of test missions, jets, and whatnot. So I was Navy and Marines at that time, and I'm sure they'll back that up if they ever get around to actually that mattering. Then we went into the CIA, well-known MK Ultra program, went all the way through that, and we just did a lot of different stuff besides just the space program. More what you'd call a rover, myself, and another small group of people.
Okay, so, I'm gonna slow you down right there because you're actually saying a few things here that people will be slightly confused with. So you're saying you're Navy and Marines. Can you elaborate? How do you go from one organization to another?
Good point. Well, originally, maybe people have forgotten this. There was no real space program involving rockets. We just had the Navy sending up jets, trying to reach the edge of the atmosphere in outer space. Well, that's
okay. Give me a year. Give me a year.
Oh, somewhere in the mid 50s, mid 50s, through till 1963 when the first Mars probe went up, which was actually a small manned rocket. So we're getting into a lot of stuff that has been not admitted to, if you will, and it's really touchy stuff when you have children or underage people in the space program. Well, it's a rather sensitive issue. So we just knew we didn't have the official ID, and we, like I say, we're rovers. Went through a lot of different programs, but we were Navy, as far as I know, when we went up in that jet. Then later we were a CIA all through the MK Ultra program. They later came back to me years later, and so if anybody wants to check that out in the future, I'm just going to say, that's all I want to say about it, is that information is there and it will be verified. In the same way that, any of the stuff that I say about Mars, I will be very careful only to impart information that I know there are records of up there on Mars and other places that can be verified in the near future.
Okay, great. So you were part of a small group. How big was the group?
All right, in the 70s when we went up, it was we were called Alpha Team. I believe there was Delta Team, but I'm not 100% sure who they were. I do know who Alpha Team are to this day, and I received an email from one of them this morning saying, go ahead, give it hell. And there was 5 of us, and the pilot.
Okay, but I thought you said you went up in the 50s.
No, in the 50s, we did test missions in jets and in rockets, but we did not go to Mars until 1963-ish, at which time we did one quick orbit in a little ship that was, everyone was told was a probe, but there was actually two young adults in there, me and the same pilot who flew us up there in the 70s, and all we did was orbit once and come straight back because there was a teeming civilization evident on the surface.
Okay, so around you're saying 1963.
Right.
A short trip, and then subsequent to that, what happened? Like, in other words, you said you went in the 70s, but between, say, 63 and 70, any other trips?
Well, that's when everything happened, okay? Right now we have to talk about aliens as opposed to denizens of this solar system, which even if there's ants and centipedes and humanoids and other strange creatures on Mars, they're still what I would consider locals. However, the silver flying saucers of legend just never went away as far as we were concerned. And the whole disclosure project, of which I was a member or, in touch with many of them, formed out of basically base personnel and pilots who had testimony and who had signed secrecy documents, who had finally just had enough. And I remember them forming and myself saying, "Go ahead, guys, get what you can out of this, because they're just shutting you down and cutting you off, just like they're doing to me, right?" And so during those years is the key to everything. We finally managed to identify what these silver flying saucers were, who was piloting them, where they were going, and what they were doing. Now, just to keep it short, during those same years, another alien race, viz., one from outside of our solar system, showed up and made contact with us. This will be the Greys, or I guess you can call them the Greys. Well, because of them showing up, we were able to finally go up to Mars as an organized, civilized, unarmed group of people and meet with all of the species on Mars and the two alien races, the silver saucer aliens, which I believe people are calling Pleiadians, which is probably completely wrong, not from the Pleiades, and the Greys. So we really had this meeting set up by virtue of a second alien race showing up in our solar system and saying, "This isn't right. You've had these powerful alien creatures here in their silver flying saucer for all these millennia, and they have been exploiting the Earth and exploiting Mars, and it's time for that to stop, because these people down here on Earth are civilized, they have evolved science and arts," and so they were able to put a stop to a large degree to the activities of the silver flying saucers in the solar system. And in order to make that a reality, they assisted us in going up and meeting with both of the alien races and all of the species on Mars, for 3 or 4 days, and just pretty much sort things out. On Mars, this was the greatest day in many thousands of years. It was their liberation day, where they were finally freed from the silver flying saucers, which are a powerful insect race, a powerful trisexual insect race that has been here since the beginning of our recorded history.
Okay, so now I'm going to have to back up here and ask you about what you just talked about, because it's a little bit convoluted, and it's
Deep.
It's not clear where we kind of begin. And when you say, okay, first of all, you're saying they noticed from the 50s to the 70s, they were seeing silver flying saucers. Is that correct?
Absolutely, hundreds of them.
Okay, and they, meaning the military?
Military, primarily pilots, and many sightings from the ground, but the pilots we had them pulling in beside and flying circles around us and pulling right in beside, and eventually I myself was up, and I was very high in the atmosphere, and the thing pulled in within 50 yards of me and cruised along, and I managed to get a very clear view of the pilot, which was a very large insect life form. And I came down and debriefed, and there's certainly no reason for me to lie. And they believed and had suspected all along that we had insect life forms, or what we see as insects.
All right. But in essence, so you're saying you were a pilot during that time?
Absolutely not. I never learned to fly. I've been up in jets with other people piloting them when I was a child, which is why I don't want to talk a lot about the early missions. It's very illegal, some of the stuff that was done. But this time I was up in a rocket, and I was up in probably 3 or 4 rockets. But the times that we went to Mars, we had a single pilot, or we were more or less escorted up there in the 70s.
In what kind of craft?
Well, just a small. It's amazing for people to think that you have to build a gigantic rocket to go to Mars. When we went in '63, we just simply had a 30-foot long tube with the correct engines on it, and no computers are necessary. It's very easy to fly between bodies in the solar system. And the most expensive part of the entire trip was the fuel,
Okay, so what kind of engine, what kind of propellant?
Well, you're looking at pure nitro or its equivalent. I don't know. I'm not technical in that way. But, boy, we left the atmosphere at 20,000 per, and I guess we were up to 500,000 miles an hour before it could bat an eye. It was just a very simple rocket with 4 little wings with a rocket engine on each so that you could steer and reverse the engines to put on the brakes. Quite simple.
Okay.
But in 1963, there was incredible pressure. We had to do this. We had to get up there. Everything that you've ever heard about the UFO craze, in reality, behind the scenes, was actually happening. We had direct evidence of civilization on Mars and flying saucers going back and forth between Mars. And we were starting to suspect things like the wormhole and all of it. So we had to get up there. So they put this rocket together. And many people chipped in on it. I would imagine 3 or 4 different organizations, 3 or 4 different countries were involved. We were often in touch with Russians and different people because it was truly exciting behind the scenes, and nobody really knew what to do other than get there. So that's what they did, and I was just in the ship. The first time I'd been up in space 4 or 5 times before that. And in the 70s with the team, I walked out in front and was the liaison officer. So we were non-military based, we were intelligence based, and we were intending to have civilized meetings rather than conflict.
Okay, and at this time you're coming forward because you say that you have a sponsor of a sort?
I don't have a sponsor of a sort. I just have this information that's been driving me a bit crazy for about the last 20 years.
Okay, but in our pre-discussions, you mentioned, for example, that Randy Kramer, who came forward as Captain K,
Yep.
he has a person behind the scenes who, in a certain sense, was backing him, who was a military officer. You told me that you had somebody behind the scenes like that as well. Is this correct or not?
Well, a few of the people from my time, since I was a child in the program, most of the people from the 50s or early 60s are deceased, or just no longer available to talk. So no, I don't have a personal sponsor. I would just say that the Navy and the CIA have records of these activities. And if it ever comes down to having to prove this to anybody, which I doubt will happen, those records will be there, or if those organizations are approached, they will say, yeah, he was involved.
Okay, fair enough. So now you're saying that they, meaning this organization, and basically you're saying it's a cross-agency and cross-country organization, correct?
Absolutely. Great confusion on all sides.
Okay, and you're saying that they decided that they were going to deal with these silver saucers, found out they were from, at least, are we saying they're the only race that was flying them, are these ant beings, or are you saying there are other beings flying these saucers?
Well, the silver saucers are ancient masters, and if you want to just jump into the deep water, they owned this solar system for thousands of years, all the planets. And you'll hear Randy talk about the wormhole between the Earth and Mars, just mere seconds or minutes between the planets of this system. Well, we found out about that too, and it just kind of, everybody went a bit numb, to be honest, on all sides. Nobody knew really what to do other than get up there. And then once we saw that it was heavily populated, much more so than just, the one area that Randy has described in great detail, the whole planet was populated. Well, we just had to go up there. The intervention of the second powerful, more or less intergalactic race, the Greys, was what made it all possible to go up and get everybody together all in the same few days and have a civilized, powwow.
Okay, so you're saying that we were already in touch with the Greys, and weren't the Greys also flying saucers?
No, they were the energy-based life forms that everybody talks about, the creatures of light or just pure energy. Now, that may just indeed have been their probe creatures or their monitoring, whether you call them creatures or just highly advanced form of technology that we don't understand, immaterial creatures, balls of light, who don't use sight, who don't use speech. So they, in fact, had to construct bodies in order to come down here and try to converse with us face to face. And that's what they did. And I believe that's what Randy ran into in his garage at one time. I gave him such a bad time. And I had one walk into the living room and scare the life out of me one time. So this all happened prior.
So you believe that the Greys, or at least, are you aware there are several races of Greys?
Well, sure.
Okay, but you believe that a certain race of Greys were initially light beings that then manufactured these gray bodies in order to inhabit our solar system?
Well, it seems like that. Whoever these were, they were unable to communicate in their way. We just couldn't understand them. So this is how I understand it, is that they had to actually get down here and get into touch with us. Then an event happened that alerted us that it was time for everybody to get together in this solar system up on Mars and deal with it. Now, at that time, I'll just keep it short. I was sleeping one night. I woke up. I walked out into a field for no apparent reason and was drawn up maybe 100 feet or so into a vehicle. And there was a bunch of Greys or humanoids, seeming like different types, in this craft. And they just informed me that you folks from Earth are going up in the near future. I will come and go with you, and we're just going to sort out the whole issue. So I assume that what has happened is that the energy light creatures that we were seeing so many times were some form of probe or forward, monitoring services. They finally got here in person, since they're probably from quite far away, and set up this meeting on Mars in the 70s, and that's...
Okay, but so first of all, you're saying you're part of sort of a military cross-agency, intelligence agency effort, assuming you were trained by them, and that now you're saying that the way you got to the meeting was through this interaction with the Greys that abducted you?
They did not abduct anybody. They just came along, told us what was happening, took about 20 minutes, put me back down. A few days later or weeks later, we got in our little ship and flew up there along with, I suppose, what we're referring to as Greys, which is, just keep it simple. And of course, the Silver Saucer aliens were there, and a very complex series of events went down. And I've spent 6 or 8 hours just detailing what happened when we first got off the ship on Mars and started meeting with the locals, went underground, met, I guess you'd say, the main older insect life forms there, head tour of Mars, and a whole bunch of stuff happened. Too much to go into now.
Okay,
But it was set up by the so-called Greys. It was set up and made possible by them. We went up in our own ship, escorted by them. It just seemed like there was no trouble going anywhere or doing anything once these creatures were there to help us.
I see. All right.
Military, don't forget. We never had military ID. We did very many different things, and we were flexible, and we were more intellectual based. I went up there. I'm artistic type. We had a biologist. We had a physics, chemistry conscious person, an animals conscious person. We had an artist, because no cameras are allowed on the surface, no weapons. Nothing was allowed in the civilized areas of Mars except civilized behavior.
Okay.
This links up directly to Captain Kramer's testimony. It's just the other part of the planet. He was in the hot spot up north there, a very controlled, smaller area. But this was years before that in the civilized areas of Mars. So I pretty much understand what's gone on up there with the war games that they play, but we were not involved in anything like that. This was 100% civilized, highly intelligent, fascinating, amazing meeting of different races.
Okay, and have you been in touch with Randy Kramer about your testimony?
Not personally, but I remember him, or I remember the whole project, and I remember him specifically because he was so unique, and he was just the right guy. He was the guy who threw down his gun and walked up to the ants, right? Just as, he's the guy to talk out of that whole crew. If there is one, I don't think anybody selected him. I just think he more or less emerged. And to me, that was just the biggest relief I've had in the last 20 or 30 years, is finally here's somebody breaking the ice. Maybe I can tell what happened before that now. Okay.
So, and you did attempt to come forward on your own, did you tell me 10 years ago or something? Or
I can't remember, 7, 8 years ago. I've made vague posts here and there, and I hinted at, and I've been talking to lots of people, that are not part of official programs and stuff. And there's many people who, believe the whole thing and seem to know a lot of it. But, I just see that the public will be kept in the dark as much as possible. And I just say right now that the main source of problems that I saw and that I experienced personally, it did the most damage, and Randy talks about this too, from the 50s right through, was the military compartmentalization of information, which is just extreme. You can't understand how extreme that is unless you experience it, where you can do amazing, impossible things with people, and then it just disappears over your head, and you do not see those people again for years. And an example of that myself would be astronaut Gordon Cooper, who I was around during his career. Well, he signed a secrecy document or two. Then he started testifying about UFOs and other stuff that he hadn't signed secrecy documents on. And at a certain point, he said, I want to see that kid that I knew back in the 50s and 60s. Where is he? He couldn't find me for the longest time. He had to make threats in order that we could get together and talk for half an hour and put his mind at ease about a couple of things. So the compartmentalization of the so-called command chain was extreme and caused a lot of problems, and it caused all the problems that Captain Kramer and the others went through up on Mars and got themselves destroyed because of this weird, stupid human tendency to compartmentalize everything and just take all the information up top, and deal with it from there like you're playing with toy soldiers. And, of course, on Mars, a truly advanced, civilized place, that kind of thinking just doesn't fly. It doesn't fool them. It doesn't work.
Okay, so so did you ever go to the moon? Just curious.
I have trouble with that. I really do, because I know that the moon is... Actually, I'd like not to talk about the moon at this point.
Okay.
Because it's got a lot of history, too. I don't clearly remember standing on it, but I remember the astronauts being up there and one of them going a bit nuts, saying, look at that, look at that, look at that. Well, he was seeing something, there's been little hints dropped openly all along by the people involved. And I think this has all been part of disclosure, which is a huge 40-year project, 50-year project so far, where hundreds and hundreds of little bits of information keep coming from reliable sources. And, you know, there's a lot of misinformation as well. But eventually, I feel that it'll all come together. And it's very, very obvious that all of this is hinging on some clear photographs of Mars would end everything like that.
Okay. So when, assuming that, you know, to sort of bypass a lot of questions I have that would come to mind naturally in the process of what you're saying, I'm going to allow you to like, at this point, jump ahead and explain what Mars looked like on the surface and what you encountered when you arrived on the various trips, and also how many trips did you go there for?
All I can remember is circling in 63. We went around that planet, I don't know, 10,000 miles an hour. Didn't seem that big. But that's probably because we circled it so fast. And our eyes just bugged out. We took a little bit of film. They were waving at us, you know. It just happened like a dream. Came back, debriefed, more or less forgot about it, and I could talk endlessly about the REM and getting, but that's a whole separate subject. The only other time I was up there for anything important was in the 70s, and that was what you could call Liberation Day on Mars, where they were finally freed after, tens of thousands of years from the domination of the huge, horrifically psionically powerful solar saucer, trisexual solar saucer aliens, which are not Pleiades, and we should find a better name for them. So in 73, or whenever it was, 75, whenever it was, I don't even know. We got out of that ship on the edge of a crater that was designated for us to land there. And just going step by step, I have a picture of this crater very clear. You can see every step, and I will have that video up of what I'm describing. Okay, the shock and the awe are two different things when you get off on an alien planet like that. If it was just barren rock and sand, well, it would be, you know, no big deal. But we got off the ship. I believe a human being said, go through that tunnel over there. And we said, okay, we're not supposed to go out of sight of the ship, which was up taking pictures. But we walked through a tunnel, or we were headed for this tunnel. Well, as we approached that tunnel, we went up a little flight of stairs that were carved into the natural landscape, as everything is in Mars. They don't build structures, they build into the landscape. Very artistic, very unique looking, every step carved. And I remember going up those steps and I just looked at the steps because they were so amazing. It's just like, gee, this is really, you know, amazing. Then I looked up at a scene that virtually had me saying, this must be a dream, to myself and pinching myself, because it was more or less the entrance to this tunnel that was going to take us into the crater where the meeting was scheduled. And it was beyond spectacular. It was like the ancient Earth, carved heads of monkeys the size of 10 feet tall, and dragons and lizards and vines and jungle. It was all beautiful. It was all incredibly intricate. It was all you just looked at that and went, well, I'm in a bigger place than I thought I lived in here. This is stuff out of science fiction. It was just absolutely gorgeous and yet ancient and primitive looking and just spectacular. And the carving was so good that you thought that you were looking at real giant monkey heads and dragons and so forth. And we just looked at that for about 10 or 15 seconds with awe. Just couldn't believe it, right? How beautiful it was. Then we walked into the tunnel, and then it got, a lot more exciting once we came out the other side, because we were on the edge of a large crater. I'll just say at this point, the Martian population are well aware that they're well aware of the Earth and everything about us. But they're well aware that you cannot be exposed to the population up there. Bang. It's too much. It has to happen in stages. So we first saw a human, a strange-looking human. Then we saw some incredible ancient artifacts that suggested things like giant apes and giant lizards and giant insects. It was just carvings. And we went to the edge of the crater, and it was a huge blast crater of over a block across. And on the other side of the crater, which went down maybe 200 feet in the middle, were various life forms. Humans, apes, monkeys, big ones, humanoids, different types, ants, giant centipedes. Now you're seeing this at a distance, and it's like never seen anything like it in your life. A couple of people just had to just sit right down, were hyperventilating and gasping for breath, right? The rest of us just stood there like, oh boy, that's indescribable. But that's step 2 of exposure. They know, that if you just walked up to that right in your face, it would be too much. And in fact, the next step, we went back into a tunnel and we ran into an Easter Island humanoid, maybe 10 or 11 feet tall. Totally different species. Very dark black, very sedate, just a great, big, cool Easter Island guy with the head just like the Easter Island carvings.
Okay.
And he directed us to. Wait, just one moment. He directed us to some holes in the layers of rock that went down through the crater. We went down through those holes, Martian elevator, if you will. It's brilliant. You can drop down 100 feet in a matter of seconds. Then we entered a large cavern, and we saw some normal humanoid ants, 4 to 5 feet tall, standing, and behind them, contained behind a huge crystal glass wall, were giant ants the size of cars. Very many of them boiling away like a normal Earth anthill, okay? This is your first shock. Behind me, the 4 people behind me, one fell down and went into fetal position. Another one started getting ill. Somebody else was just gasping for breath and down on their knees, just from the shock of seeing these things 100 yards away. And then, in order to get just over that hump, a little humanoid walked out and went over and started interfacing with them. And we managed to unfreeze enough to go, oh, they're not, it's just absolutely terrifying to see the big ants if you've never seen them in reality before. And it actually knocked 2 or 3 of us right off our feet just to see them. So you have a combination of events that are awesome and ones that are shocking. And they expose you to that, in about a 15 or 20 minutes of and wow. And then you get over that and they lead you off somewhere where you don't have to look at anything like that for a while, and it's a nice cave and you can have some water and lay down if you have to recover.
Okay, but you were in a cave as opposed to a building. Is that correct?
Oh, this crater, it's huge and it's made up of many layers of rock, and they're carving it. Hundreds of creatures are there carving this crater. And what they were doing on that exact day was, since it was Liberation Day, a huge day on Mars, they were carving over the image. The whole crater had been a giant spider, an ancient spider, the biggest spider ever. They were carving over it into an image of a happy monkey and happy ant and a few of the other creatures of Mars. And they're so good at carving up there, there's just nothing like it that anyone has ever seen on the Earth that good. They were carving it over, and there's a picture that shows it half done. Mere hours later, or certainly by the next day, it would have been finished. But we went down through the layers of rock by dropping through this series of holes. Very natural way to travel 100 feet down to the bottom of the crater. Then we entered a tunnel there and went around a spiral walkway going down and emerged in a huge cavern underneath the crater, and it's big, like an aircraft hangar or bigger. And then other tunnels went off the whole planet. The legend of the hollow Earth is, in fact, referring to Mars. So it's much softer rock. The whole planet is not hollowed out. There's tunnels everywhere, and that's how it is up there. Most of the life is underground, and that's where the water is and the plants are.
Okay. So now I'd like to know, when you say this is Liberation Day, what do you mean exactly?
Silver saucers leaving our system. Their fun has been spoiled by the Greys and their other humanoid races that have come here and said, no, these Earth people are civilized. You've been exploiting them for thousands of years, pretty much having your way with this planet, having your way with Mars. All the damage done to the Earth, we can talk about that later. The cataclysm was caused by them. Mars was a beautiful planet, much like Earth. It died. It took a harder hit than we did after us. It was covered with beautiful shallow seas, and just was a real gem, and they nearly destroyed it too. So,
okay,
but you're calling, in short, our planet destroyers.
All right, but you're calling them silver saucers, but the beings driving those saucers, you said, were ants. Is that correct?
Incorrect. They are trisexual, unique, ancient race from somewhere back towards galactic central, where there is one hell of a lot of radiation and a lot of gravity. They are incredibly powerful. They are trisexual, and each creature is different. We have a giant wasp. What you could call a giant water bear would be the male, and the third member of this highly telepathic trisexual union is what is seen as a giant serpent. It's like a snake-like creature, 30 to 40 feet long, but they're all warm-blooded, highly, highly evolved, have a million-year history, and they were the only creatures that had a powerful flying saucer with high-powered weapons in this solar system for many thousands of years. So they own the solar system.
Okay, so made up of three types of beings. One looking like a serpent, one looking like a what was it? A centipede?
Wasp.
A wasp.
Wasp. That's the female. Huge, and I mean.
Okay, and the third one.
10 feet.
Okay, the third one.
And the male, which is the largest. If you know what a water bear is one of the simplest and oldest forms of life on the Earth. Other people say it looks like a turkey, louse, or whatever. But the thing is, each creature was fairly unique. Like when you looked at the female, is that a wasp? Is that a spider? Is that a beetle? It's just a very highly evolved insect life form. Evolved to warm blood, probably before we were. And they've been going out through the galaxy effectively like wasps, spreading from a nest for millennia.
All right. Now, can you tell me, you said that they were made to leave. How were they made to leave? Are you talking about our military? Are you talking about our military working with other races? How were they persuaded to leave?
Our military had nothing to do with it, ever. The Greys came here. I hate to say Pleiadians, the saucer aliens are not something you could destroy. They are too powerful. All you can do is spoil their fun. They are highly intelligent, estimated IQ at 500, psionic power far beyond any of the other insect races. They can control the ants and the centipedes and anything else, any insect life form, absolutely and utterly, and did so on the Earth and on Mars and in the solar system. So the Greys, so to speak, or this how many different humanoid types there were, could not destroy them, but they could sure spoil their fun, and make it just, no, you can't be on the Earth anymore. We can fly around with you. We can stop you from doing this. We can stop you from taking human beings. And once that happened, they're no longer interested. They are combative and gladiatorial, to a high degree, and they will not stay somewhere where they can't have absolute dominion. So the last we saw of them, and it ended up, there was, I believe, 30 saucers in total in this solar system, when originally in ancient times there was only one. The last we saw of them, they were headed for the Pleiades. After gathering up some fuel and so forth, they headed for the Pleiades because they didn't want to stay here if they couldn't, have a planet, effectively a wild planet where they could dominate all the life forms all to themselves. Now, a couple of them did stay because they were too old, or, some of the younger ones maybe, and a treaty was struck with them, and I believe that's how it is today.
So, I appreciate this information and you coming forward. However, you can also appreciate from my point of view that this does sound rather outlandish, right?
What, the silver flying saucers that were on record hundreds of times from the military pilots and stuff? I don't think so. I think history has been skewed. And, I think that by 1978 we were set to announce this, and that most of the population believed, because the flyboys had come home and said, no, the bloody flying saucer flew in again. And the kids saw the insect pilot. It's true. It's just simply true. And then we started to find out the depth and the many problems and the complexity of the entire issue. And that's why I think the people with the cooler heads at the top went, this is going to take 40 or 50 years. So here we are in, the 45th year or whatever it is, and this is where we are.
Okay. Now, your job on Mars, how long were you there for?
A few days. I was liaison officer, which means I'm going to do the talking. Just like we are now, I'm going to talk to whoever's up there, and, whatever deals or so-called treaties or agreements are going to be reached, I'll be standing there going, okay, what do you want to do? So liaison officer, just an open title. Other people were there to observe scientific, draw pictures of the stuff up there. We had women along because it was very important to these more civilized races that we had both males and females of the human species up there to deal with the situation. Very civilized, very intelligent. All the civilized races on Mars, more so than ourselves, much more ancient, not deceptive or in disagreement with each other in discord. So very easy to deal with.
Okay, so, and which races are you talking about that are quote-unquote civilized and easy to deal with? And also, doesn't that contradict to some degree Randy Kramer's testimony?
Oh, absolutely not. No, everything he says is spot on. I know exactly what he's saying, and that's why I want this to link up correctly, because they were in a controlled war zone up there. Mars has been through as much war or more and has been under the dominion of the saucer creatures for a lot longer than ourselves. So they know war better than we do. And you'll notice that, as he himself will tell you, it was an ascending series of battles with more and more powerful weaponry and different races coming in, and reptilians. And I should mention that Mars has never been a reptilian planet. We saw them up there, but they were in no way particularly significant in terms of the entire planet Mars. They have their areas of space. They're everywhere. They can be grown in vats or cloned like other creatures can, the same way they can grow insects, they can grow reptiles. So those wars that they had up there were very carefully controlled war games, accelerating up to a point where at the key moment at the end of it, everybody was tempted with the forbidden technology, the artifact in the cave. Well, it was rumored to be a piece of the flying saucer, Palladian flying saucer technology, which is far more powerful than anybody else had. We don't have it. Nobody else has it. We're not allowed to have it. And they went after it. The command chain sent them in. The soldiers took the hit. And the creatures on Mars went, human beings fail. They don't appreciate a military presence up there. And it's absolutely meaningless as in terms of having a force on the ground that's going to patrol Mars against wild animals. It's a joke. It's more civilized than it is here. What Randy then did next tells the whole story. He went out and was flying around with the MDF. I just have to finish this because they are important and they do need to be up there, and we do need to have a military force up there. I'm 100% in favor of that, but not for the reasons of there's a war on the ground with reptiles or insects. There is not. There was only a controlled war zone here, there, for a certain time, and they didn't even leave that area for 17 years and get down into the civilized areas of Mars, which is quite evident by the fact that as soon as this information starts to come out, there are all kinds of creatures up on Mars that are very important and very large part of the society up there that they never even saw once. They never ran into the apes or the Easter Island people and all of these symbiotic relationships that are going on up there. They were kept in a military zone, and despite the fact that the soldiers, like I say, took the hit, and I'm 100% with them as opposed to the command chain, they were kept where they were under control the whole time, and you saw what happened to them in the end, you know. So, no,
so
the Earth military. So what is important about the MDF up there is they're now patrolling, as Randy testifies, the edges of our solar system. Now, that's a significant and meaningful reason to have a military force up there. There's no military force of human beings or any kind needed on the surface of Mars, unless things have changed drastically, which I sincerely doubt.
Okay, now you're saying it's civilized, and what beings are you classifying as civilized?
When we landed and ended up under the crater and met with the first, actually physically walked up to them, we met with ants, and they seem to be the dominant, you know, variations of ants, what we think of as ants, or mantis people, okay? There's many types, and there's many other carvings of them going back centuries and thousands of years. There's many, many types. Now, if you talk to them, right away they're going to tell you that human beings and every other lower life form evolved from the ants. And they will humor you if you think otherwise, but they're quite sure about that. And, you know, it just puts a real twist on things right away. They have great jokes about human beings. They have dark humor, light humor, interspecies humor, whatever you want to think of it as. Civilized means civilized. There really are intelligent and civilized up there. There's no war. There's no turf wars or ants going to war against reptilians or anything like that on Mars anymore, despite the fact that there was thousands of years of that going on up there when the entire solar system was under control of this larger telepathic, combative, aggressive race that was, you know, in the solar flying saucers.
Okay, and how did you communicate with the beings if you were the communicator, liaison officer, as you call it?
Well, it's just shocking. First, I think we got a bit of a psionic communication, maybe from one of the humanoids, but it wasn't clear. Then we went down under the crater, and even standing across the room from those ants, you could feel something. You know, like a shocking effect. But then, I'll talk briefly about telepathy or the psionic ability. Then we were taken down right away into some rooms, and they said, look, we're going to give you the history of Mars and of Earth and of this solar system and all the information that we have so that you'll know what you're dealing with here, right? Because these creatures are leaving. We want you to show you what's been going on for the last 10,000 years. And so, the first serious psionic communication that I had was just you were getting, you know, this wasn't done by the ants themselves, which were just a bit too strong to be in their direct presence and do things with them when you've only been there a half an hour, you know what I mean? So, we were taken by humanoids into a cave, and you put on a helmet. Okay, now this attaches to their stored telepathic psionic memories, and they have records going back to the beginning, and that's why I'm not afraid to come out with any of this information at all, because you know, they have records of it. So the first thing I was shown, I put on this helmet, and they said, okay, you're going back and you're going to do 15 years, you know, compressed, of the life of Jason, I believe, was the name that, as I understood it, a human being on the Earth immediately after the Great Cataclysm, which almost destroyed the Earth. This will take just over an hour, and you will get 15 years. Now, you don't obviously get the whole 15 years. You get significant events, and then it blends into the next one, and then you're ahead 2 years and another year. And it's sort of a beautifully done melding together of 15 years of this man's life on the just post-cataclysm Earth. And in these telepathic psionic memories, you are the character. It's so good that you are actually looking out through the eyes of the character. Now, these ants and other psionically capable insect life forms, warm-blooded, 1,000 ants could witness the same event, or hundreds of ants could be more or less interested in keeping track of a certain person, a certain creature, whatever. So they can put these records together with detail beyond anything we could approach even today. Everything's there. You are the character, the sights, the smells, the sounds, you know. And so an hour later, I popped out from under that helmet, and I had spent, you know, a compressed 15 years on the Earth, and I understood more than if you had talked at me for a week straight. It's that good. So that's how you communicate with them. They communicate with you, is more like it. And they say, you want to know this, you want to know this, you want to know this. But just go up the ladder. The ants and the other creatures can psionically communicate with you if they're in the room with you or can see you, but they can't go into great, fantastic detail and show you long, involved stories. You have to put on a helmet to do that. However, the silver saucer, so-called Pleiadian races, if you're anywhere near them, they can just take your mind over and put you on an alien planet, and you'll just be standing there going, oh, I'm somewhere else now, you know? And then suddenly you're back. And they say, gee, did we just go there? And they say, no, I just showed you that, you know? So they can, in fact, directly impart any amount of information directly to the little chemical mixture that our little brains appear as to them, and are telepathically and psionically powerful beyond any of the insect races. Hence, they dominated all of them all along. And I believe that greys and other humanoid races have this ability developed highly too, but not with the degree of power, I don't think, of these ancient insect races. It's largely an insect power. Evolution has given them this telepathic ability.
Okay.
And it culminates at the Silver Saucer Aliens. That's how they've been controlling everybody all along.
All right. So you were on Mars for how many days?
I don't know, 3, 4?
All right. And did you ever go back?
I can't remember. I don't think so. We may have, but the amount of information, once you get to a certain point, you start going, okay, that's too much already. Uh-oh, the geometric is too much again, you know? And you just start thinking, I don't need any more. I don't want to think about the moon. I don't want to think about, you know, other little things that may have happened. This information is too important, and what it means, you know, needs to be talked about for a long time before I start worrying about, oh, what did I do? What have I forgotten? It's already too much.
So
I don't think I went back. I don't think so.
All right. And this happened in the 70s, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did you have a commanding officer?
Absolutely not. We had no command chain whatsoever. We had no radio contact with anyone other than our pilot, who was just as stunned and amazed and numb as we were, and didn't know what he was even seeing on the ground, these huge creatures following us around and stuff. And no, we were just to come back and debrief, and I was going to do the talking, which didn't amount to, you know, a lot. We were just mostly there to learn, since we're the kid brother race here completely. You know, we were the ones that were like, oh, I see, I understand. They pretty much knew what was going on out there.
Okay,
and
now
they've known about the Earth all along.
Let me ask you. You know about MK Ultra. You say you're a part of that program, and yet you believe you went to Mars. Is it possible that this is an implanted memory?
No, not at all. The MK Ultra program we never knew was MK Ultra. Early on, we started roving. It was called roving. Now I'm talking my aunt, my mother, my father, and other people who I've known for 40, 50 years were all part of this, and we did many, many different things. We did not do, and I particularly did not do, the standard mind control as such. Okay, I saw it, and I saw the effects of drugs and all the other heavy, dirty stuff that we could talk about for hours. But I was a bit young, so they didn't do that to me. I was just being shot up, you know, and sent here and sent there, primarily with my aunt, who was a bit of a genius type, you know, going, and we were doing things. The actual program itself, I remember for a very short time in laboratory surroundings, where you would see the experiments and the implants and the surgeries and the freaks and the mutations and the the things that they were doing to people with drugs and all the rest of it.
Okay,
that
now where did you grow up?
Oh, all over the place. Starting out in Europe, taken to America, moved around there a couple of times, taken up north. And I've lived all over North America. They tend to keep you moving around, and I've just moved around a lot. I've been traveling and doing a lot of other things, right?
Okay, what was your father? Was he in the military?
Huh. Who was my father? I mean, boy, that gets too complicated and irrelevant. It's just not relevant.
Okay, but it is important to know in terms of what the testimony you're giving as to whether you had family in the military.
No, we never had military ID, even though we did many Navy and so-called CIA missions. Like I say, we were roving, and I guess you could say intelligence community, but don't forget there was no real secret space program in those days, except on paper. It was just like, yeah, the secret space program. We're waiting for the flying saucers to give us a chance to talk to them for about 40 years, right? We just couldn't get near them. So there was no military involvement with aliens other than they would cite them, and come down and say, hey, we saw this, and then nothing would happen. The information would disappear over your head, and that would be the end of it. So
okay.
Military, we were in the military, out of the military, into this industry, into another industry, into the monster program, out. Okay? Totally involved in doing things rather than sitting somewhere being conditioned in a laboratory or something.
Okay. Now, you're coming out using the name Captain J, and you're doing that in part because of Randy Kramer using the name Captain K, and you figured you'd be Captain J. Is that correct?
Well, just because it comes before in the alphabet, and I come before him in the disclosure of Mars, and it is my initial. But on Mars, I was known as Johnny Alpha, and that'll be the name that they call me if I went back there. And there'll be a statue up there of everybody who's ever been up there. So Johnny Alpha, because of Alpha Team, which is they were just thrilled that we were up there. They were really, really excited on Mars. It's like finally, after thousands of years, the Earth people are coming up as an organized force, right? Or not a force, but a group to meet with us, and we'll get over this thing, right? Because they saw us whip around there in 1963. They couldn't believe that it took us over 10 years or something to get back up there. They thought we'd be right back up to say hello, and help them out or meet with them or whatever. So very civilized, It'd be like if a big flying saucer circled the entire Earth and everybody saw it, and then it just flew away and didn't come back. We'd be like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So that's how it was like up there. They were quite excited and happy. And when we got there, I'll just tell you what happened in terms of the Martian population. We got out of the ship, walked to the entranceway of the tunnel, and I later found out that within 10 minutes or 12 minutes, every creature on Mars knew that we were there. The Earth people are here. And the way that works is telepathic message goes around the planet as fast as the internet, okay? And then every non-telepathic creature, the many mammals, the creatures living out in the wild areas or near wild areas, are told. They say, "Oh, the Earth people are here," and literally, faster than the modern Earth communications, the entire planet knew the Earth people are here, which was a rather large event.
Okay. So actually, we've been going for a while, and I'm going to have to close this down because I've got another thing, scheduled for later today, and so on and so forth. But at the moment, can you explain what it is that it made you want to come forward, and what you plan to do in the future in relation to all of this information?
Well, thank Randy Kramer for when I saw his testimony, I watched about 20 minutes of it and I had to turn it off. It was just like, oh, this is too good. Finally. And I realized that they had screwed up so badly up there not the soldiers, but the command chain, that they were pretty much going, okay, there's nowhere left to go. We have to finally, and of course, disclosure's been coming for 30 or 40 years, and so it's just an inevitable step, right? Like I say, there was 4 or 5 of us in my team, and I pretty much know where they are. Nobody else is interested in talking, particularly. So I was walking out in front of them up there, and now I'm talking out in front, and it just doesn't. I don't feel like there's any hurry, but I will credit Captain Kramer with coming out and really making me feel it was okay, feel that I had a chance to do this. And you can't not do this. You cannot carry information like this around in your head for decades like this and have it on life. It is torturous. They don't take care of their own. They don't get paid for this or anything, since we don't have military ID. So it's been very, very destructive. When Randy talks about the X number of bad years that he had, I've had that many of very bad years from this. And in the future, if I can get most of the information out of the way, I can talk about how destructive and horrible it is to be part of the human command chain of compartmentalized information. That it's just ended up destroying lives and families and killing people. Okay? So okay. I'm not in favor of a lot of our action here on the Earth. So anything I can do to help clear that up in the future and stay away from other, hideous disasters, like just recently occurred to those soldiers up there, yeah, I have to come out and talk about it. You can't walk around with it.
What are you saying recently occurred to the soldiers up there?
Well, did they not get massacred?
Well, I'm asking you. What do you know
about this? Well, according to the testimony, they went after the forbidden technology there in that cavern. I've detailed this in a long talk, but they went after that forbidden...
Okay, you're referring to Randy Kramer. You're referring to something that Randy Kramer experienced. Is that right?
That's correct, but it's all the same bunch.
But this was not recent. This is many years ago now.
That's recent in my mind, because disclosure happens at the speed of a snail with a flat tire. You just cannot force information out like this ahead of its time. So, for example, I said I went online 7 or 8 years ago. I started having real trouble with this about 2001, okay? Just real trouble on many levels. And they don't take care of their own down here. I'll tell you that, unless you have the ID and the claims and 1,000,000 miles of paperwork lined up. They will just ignore you and, and not take care of you, other than just very, lip service. So that's how I identified with Captain Kramer. He said a lot of the same things that I feel, which is, they kind of let us down. But since it was such an incredibly, literally insane, numbing experience for everybody, you have to be able to understand that. But you can't stop it coming out. You cannot have this information and just walk around going, oh, giant centipedes that I talked to on Mars, without thinking, am I crazy? And of course, you're not, because other people show up, and you there's so many memories across decades and, through related occurrences that, you just have to chip in and do your part. So I have a rather large part here at the moment, but of course,
okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you here. We, as I say, our time is limited, but I do have a very small audience here, and I do see that we've got a couple questions in the chat.
Right.
One person wants to know if you're 100% human.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have no implants. I had an early implant in my ankle. I saw the implants, but no, I would be human and from, born in Europe sometime in the late 40s, early 50s.
Okay, and another person wants to know why you're wearing sunglasses.
No reason. I just think it looks more like a space captain,
Okay.
No, I don't, because, I don't know. Why not?
All right.
I have blue eyes. Anyone care?
Fair enough. So thank you very much, Captain Jay, for sharing your testimony with us today. This is, as I say, very impromptu, and there's no real way to vet this information at this time. Perhaps there will be in the future, and we'll just kind of leave an open door and see what happens. All right.
Tip of the iceberg, Carrie. I've got a nice little email address so anybody can.
All right.
Can contact me at. I'm a bit of a writer, an artistic type, so we'll have a book. Of science fiction, not adventures on Mars or anything like that. But I'm not looking to, for anything commercial out of this. It's just I really want this to go the right way.
Okay,
and,
what is the email address that you want to give out?
Okay, well, we're Team Alpha, so I called myself Alpha Bot instead of Alphabet. ALPHA Alpha BOT Bot at fastmail.fm.
Okay, at Alphabot at fast, because I'm typing it in the chat here, at fastmail.fm.
That's more or less set up for just for conversation about this.
Okay, hopefully I hopefully I typed that correctly. If not, I'll put this on my website eventually or on YouTube. All right, thank you very much again, and take care of yourself. Okay.
It's been really good talking to you. Hope we can do it again sometime.
All right.
Okay.
And thanks for listening, everyone.
Okay.
I'm sorry. What was that? You want to show a book of some kind?
No.
What is that?
I think it's an alien toy that my friend just happens to have here in the living room. We don't have them for sale yet. We don't have any.
Oh, I see. Okay.
See any. All right.
All right.
Everybody.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.